The executioner's gauntlet opened, and I dropped through the red-lit belly of the ship. For one suspended second, there was no wind. Only the cold imprint of his fingers around my arm and the pale faces of the Regency Council watching from behind the observation glass. Then gravity took me. Air struck like a physical blow. My ceremonial mantle snapped above my shoulders before tearing free, its silver fabric spiraling toward the cliffs. The restraint chain between my wrists hammered against my ribs. Somewhere overhead, loudspeakers carried the regent's voice across Vera's public channels. Let Monster Valley judge the traitor blood. I twisted onto my back. The execution ship hovered 600 feet above me, black against the copper sky. Cameras tracked my fall from its open bay. They wanted the colonies to watch their princess disappear. They wanted fear to finish what law could not. I raised my bound hands toward the nearest lens and held its gaze until the ship became a dark coin in the clouds. No plea, no farewell. If they wanted submission, they would have to broadcast its absence. The first bank of acid fog swallowed me. Heat crawled beneath my collar. The mist smelled of scorched stone and bitter metal, and every breath left a chemical taste along my teeth. My descent harness should have activated automatically. The status strip on my belt remained black. They had removed its braking cell. Below, the valley opened like an old wound. 3 miles of basalt spires, sulfur vents, and bleached bones caught between ridges. Court maps marked the place with a single warning glyph. No retrieval. Nothing sent there returned. I forced my wrists apart until the chain went taut, then hooked it over the emergency buckle at my waist. The clasp cut into my palms. Once. Twice. The third strike released the reserve membrane hidden inside the harness lining. Thin polymer burst behind me with a crack like rifle fire. It did not stop the fall. It turned death into something that might take longer. I swung hard toward a basalt shelf. My shoulder hit first. Stone scraped armor from my side, and momentum carried me over the edge into a slope of black gravel. I rolled until the chain caught around a mineral spur. The restraint snapped tight. My body stopped inches above a smoking fissure. For several breaths, all I heard was gravel ticking into the depths and the slow hiss of acid settling across my armor. The execution ship's engines faded overhead. It did not circle back. Of course it did not. I pulled myself upright. One boot had split at the heel. The reserve membrane hung from my harness in melted ribbons. Along my forearm, the royal seal still glowed beneath the skin, a white biometric crescent announcing that Elara of Vera remained alive. Alive, but without rank, protection, or any road out. A sound moved through the fog below. Not a roar. Too measured. A faint metallic click, followed by another farther east. Then another. I remembered the nursery warnings about the valley beasts. How their eyes appeared first. How they gathered silently before feeding. I braced the chain around my fists and faced the dark. Red lights emerged beneath the acid haze. Dozens. Hundreds. Then thousands, spread across the valley floor in disciplined rows. None blinked. None changed height. And when the fog thinned for half a heartbeat, I saw that every red point sat behind a narrow pane of glass. Not eyes. Sights. All aimed at me. A low electronic tone rolled across the valley, and every red point dropped toward the ground at once. The motion was too precise for beasts. Rifles lowered behind ridges of black stone. Armored figures rose from trenches cut into the valley floor, their helmets matte beneath the acid haze, their respirators releasing pale bursts into the bitter air. I knew that armor. Varen broadcasts had shown it burning 6 months earlier while the region announced that Monster Valley had devoured the last human battalion. Yet thousands now stood below me. Alive. Silent. Waiting. A command crackled through external speakers. Weapons safe. Metal clicked in disciplined waves. The sound crossed the valley like hard rain. One soldier climbed from the nearest trench. He carried no raised weapon, only a short thermal cutter clipped to his chest. A faded name strip marked his armor, Elias. He walked into the open with empty hands visible, boots grinding through mineral crust that smoked beneath each step. The formation behind him remained still. No one shielded him. No one aimed at me. He stopped 6 feet away and looked first at the royal seal glowing in my arm, then at the chain wrapped around my fists. Princess Elara. His voice came through a damaged speaker, roughened by static. The fall was 1,200 feet. Disappointed? My throat tasted of copper and acid. No, Elias removed his helmet. Cold vapor curled from the collar's seal. His hair was cut close, threaded with gray, and a pale burn crossed one side of his face. Impressed, I tightened the chain. The Regency declared your army dead. That made hiding easier. Behind him, trench covers folded back. Human medics, engineers, and rifle teams emerged beneath dim amber lamps. Field generators hummed inside basalt alcoves. Water collectors ticked against stone. This was not a handful of survivors clinging to a ruin. It was an army maintained with patience and concealed with terrifying discipline. Elias extended one hand toward the restraints. May I? No Varen officer had asked permission before touching a condemned prisoner. I held out my wrists. The thermal cutter ignited with a blue-white hiss. Heat pressed against my scales without reaching skin. One link glowed orange, softened, and fell onto the rock with a sharp ring. The second followed. For the first time since the council chamber, my hands belonged to me. Elias stepped back rather than taking hold of them. Around us, the human line turned outward, not inward. Their rifles faced the fog, leaving me unwatched at the center. Why were you waiting? I asked. His gaze moved to the sky, where the execution ship had vanished beyond the sulfur clouds. Because the Regency throws away anything it believes the valley will erase. He clipped the cutter back onto his armor. And because we learned not to trust official death reports. An officer approached with a gray field cloak, but Elias took it and offered it without placing it around my shoulders. I accepted. The fabric was coarse, warm from an internal heating mesh, and smelled faintly of machine oil. Far above, thunder pulsed through the cloud deck. My royal seal brightened beneath my skin. Several human sensors answered with urgent chirps. Elias glanced at the readings, then toward the trenches. They'll know you survived soon. Then bind me, I said. Display me as your prisoner. It may delay their strike. His expression did not change, but the army behind him seemed to grow quieter. We didn't wait 6 months to put another chain on you. He pointed toward the amber-lit entrance cut into the cliff. You can leave alone or cross our line under protection, but you choose what you are when you enter. The open gate waited beyond him. So did several thousand soldiers my government had buried with a lie. And for the first time, no crown stood between me and my next step. Acid rain whispered against the thermal cloak, each drop flashing pale green before the fabric neutralized it. Beyond the open gate, amber guide lights cut through the fog and traced a narrow path into the cliff. Elara remained outside the defensive line. Elias had already turned the broken royal chain over in one gloved hand, its severed links clicking softly against his armor. A prisoner, Elara said, can be exchanged without dishonor. Whose dishonor? His voice stayed low. She looked past him. Human soldiers stood behind basalt barricades, their rifles angled toward the ground. No one approached her. No one celebrated. Even their silence refused to decide for her. Vera recognizes only 3 lawful conditions in war, she said. Sovereign, soldier, or captive. I have no command. I carry no weapon. Therefore, I am your captive. She extended both wrists. The gesture had opened treaties, ended duels, and once forced an admiral to surrender his fleet. Here, it produced nothing but the hiss of acid on stone. Elias crouched beside a supply case and removed a human restraint band. Matte black polymer. Magnetic clasp. No ornament. Elara felt the muscles in her shoulders loosen by a fraction. A familiar category. A place permitted by law. Elias weighed the band, then set it on the basalt between them. If I close that around your wrists, he said, the council still owns your next decision. You would gain leverage. I'd gain a hostage. There is a difference. Not to the person wearing it. A sensor mast rotated above the trench with a dry mechanical whine. Its amber indicator swept across Elara, paused over the biometric glow beneath her skin, then continued. Elias stepped away from the restraint. He left it lying within her reach. Walk back into the valley, he said. No one will stop you. Cross this line, and you enter as a protected guest. No cell, no collar, no claim on your name. Cold mist slipped beneath the cloak and tightened across her ribs. Beyond the gate came the hum of generators, the smell of hot insulation, and the muted rhythm of thousands of living soldiers inside a grave Vera had assigned them. Behind her, the valley descended into green darkness. Elara bent down. Her fingers hovered over the restraint band. Then she picked it up and examined the clasp. One movement would restore the order she understood. Captivity could be recorded. Explained. Forgiven. Choice could not. She closed the band around the broken length of her royal chain instead. The clasp snapped shut with a hard, final click. Then she placed both pieces on the ground outside the human line. Elias did not offer his hand. He simply moved aside. Elara stepped toward the amber lights. The boundary was only a strip of silver wire pressed into black rock, less than an inch wide. Her right boot crossed it first. Human weapons remained lowered. Her left followed. Behind her, the fog swallowed the discarded chain. Ahead, the soldiers opened a passage without bowing. Elara walked between them under her own name, carrying no crown, no title they were required to obey, and no restraint she could blame for the direction of her feet. At the inner blast door, a warning pulse suddenly washed the corridor red. Human sensors chirped in sharp succession, all turning toward the living seal beneath her skin. Elias looked at the accelerating readings. The choice had been hers. What followed would belong to everyone. A dry electronic trill cut through the base, too precise to be an alarm and too fast to ignore. Red light traveled along the basalt corridor in pulsing bands. The air smelled of hot insulation and acid dragged in from the valley. Elara stood beneath the scanner arch while its narrow beams traced the living seal embedded below her collarbone. Elias watched the tactical display assemble a line of white symbols between her body and the upper atmosphere. "That is not a tracker," Elara said. Her voice barely carried over the ventilation fans. "Royal seals only confirm identity." Elias touched 2 fingers to the display. The symbols expanded into time transmission bursts. This one confirmed survival. Each pulse struck a Regency relay above Vera, then returned with a tighter directional sweep. The execution vessel had abandoned Elara less than an hour ago. Now its fleet was searching for the woman it had thrown away. A human signals officer rotated the projection. A red cone narrowed around Monster Valley with every heartbeat. "They'll have a firing solution in 11 minutes, the officer said. Another layer appeared beneath it, the concealed human base, its buried vehicles, and the cold exhaust paths prepared through 6 months of stone. Elara saw the route at once. It curved beneath the western ridge and vanished beyond Regency surveillance. The humans had possessed a way out. Her seal was burning it from the map. "Remove it," she said. "The procedure may kill you." "Then let it." Elias turned from the display. "No. Your army survived because no one knew where to look." Elara pressed her palm over the heat spreading beneath her skin. "I crossed your line. I brought the fleet with me. You brought nothing voluntarily." Elias opened a recessed panel beside the scanner. Inside, braided fiber lines surrounded a compact black transmitter no larger than his fist. It carried every signal from the underground base to the decoy antenna fields across the valley. As long as it remained active, those fields masked the evacuation route and made the army appear scattered across miles of hostile terrain. The officer stepped closer. "Commander, if we break the uplink, the decoys die. Our core emissions become visible. And if we leave it connected? Her seal rides our signal architecture. The fleet gets the route, the troop count, everything." Elara reached for the transmitter. Elias caught her wrist before her fingers touched the heated casing. "Not hard. Just enough. Your choice got you inside," he said. "This one is mine." He released her, pulled the emergency breaker, and drove the ceramic handle down. The corridor went black. Fans spun into silence. For half a second, the base existed only as warm metal, held breath, and the faint green hiss of acid beyond the walls. Then amber emergency strips flickered alive. Elias tore the transmitter from its mount. Blue current snapped across his glove and filled the passage with the bitter smell of ozone. He dropped the unit onto the basalt floor and crushed its exposed core beneath his boot. The tactical display returned on reserve power. Every false position vanished. So did the thin blue line marking the Army's secret withdrawal corridor. In its place, one bright human signature burned beneath Monster Valley. Naked. Exact. Impossible to misunderstand. "Decoy network lost," the officer said. "Evacuation route compromised." Elara stared at the ruined transmitter. Elias had not removed her seal or returned her to the fog. He had destroyed his army's safest future to keep the protection he had offered for a single night. High above them, new contacts appeared across the display, Regency warships changing course and formation. A countdown formed beside the valley map. 8 minutes. Elias keyed the base-wide channel. Thousands of concealed soldiers heard his voice through the amber dark. The fleet knows we're alive, he said. Prepare to move. Outside, engines that had remained cold for 6 months began to turn beneath the stone. But there was no hidden road left to carry them home. Only the valley, and whatever had kept even the Regency from entering it. Amber light swept across the command bunker as the evacuation clock dropped below 7 minutes. Beneath the floor, armored carriers rumbled awake, filling the air with hot metal and the bitter smell of burned coolant. Elara stood before the valley display while human unit markers gathered at a dead end of black terrain. No corridor, no safe descent, only a field of jagged ridges marked in the Royal Archive as forbidden ground. Western ascent? Elias asked. An officer shook his head. Exposed to orbital fire. Southern shelf? Too narrow for armor. Elias studied the map without looking at Elara. He did not ask her to solve what his mercy had cost. That silence weighed more than a command. Elara touched the broken royal chain hanging from her belt. For 17 years, its crest had opened sealed doors, silenced ministers, and made soldiers kneel. Now its metal was cold against her fingers, useless except as proof that the Regency had already chosen what to call her. A traitor. The display gave a soft pulse. 6 minutes, 12 seconds. There is another route, she said. Every face turned toward her. Elara approached the tactical table and pressed her biometric seal against its glass. Gold light spread beneath her palm, forcing the human grid aside. A royal survey unfolded in thin, luminous layers, mineral shafts, basalt shelves, and a narrow passage curling through the deepest part of Monster Valley. Its designation appeared in Old Varan script. Elias read the translation. The Sovereign Path. It predates the Regency. Elara widened the projection with both hands. It begins beneath the eastern trench and exits beyond the fleet's containment line. One officer leaned closer. Why isn't it on our scans? The rock contains ferric crystal. It scatters radar and thermal imaging. And the creatures? Elias asked. A low vibration rolled through the stone, distant but deep enough to tremble in Elara's ribs. Dust sifted from a ceiling seam. Red contacts moved across the lower map, clustering along the hidden passage. They nest around it, she said. The bunker became quiet except for cooling fans and the steady mechanical click of the countdown. Elias traced the route, but did not accept it. If you guide us through, what does Varan law call that? Elara could have softened the answer. Instead, she straightened the map until the route shone between them like a blade. Disclosure of a royal passage to a foreign army. Material aid to an enemy force. Permanent forfeiture of title, inheritance, and protection under the crown. Her seal flashed again. A public broadcast forced itself onto the edge of the display. The regent's voice emerged through static, polished, and cold. Princess Elara has survived lawful judgment. Any assistance she renders to the human invaders will constitute treason against Vera. Elias reached toward the control, but Elara muted it first. The motion was small. Final. You may leave alone, he said. The fleet is hunting me. That does not make your choice ours. He turned from the map and began issuing orders for a defensive stand. Elara watched soldiers lock ammunition cases into carriers. No one demanded repayment. No one placed the restraint back in her hands. They were preparing to remain in the open because the only escape required a price that belonged to her. She removed the broken chain from her belt and laid it over the royal map. Then she dragged the entire route into the human navigation network. Gold lines spilled across thousands of helmet displays. The army's formation changed at once. Carriers pivoted east. Infantry columns folded toward the trench. A path that had been forbidden for centuries became real beneath their boots. Elias faced her. Once we enter, the Regency will record your seal leading us. Let them. Elara closed the royal archive behind the route, leaving no way to erase her authorization. The crest on her chain dimmed. You gave me a place inside your line without making me a prisoner. I will not stand behind it while your people die protecting my name. The countdown reached 4 minutes. Beyond the bunker doors, acid fog hissed against armor plating, and something enormous called from the eastern dark. Elara lifted the map projector from its cradle and walked toward the sound. "Form your army behind me, Commander," she said. "I know the way through." A pulse too low to hear rolled through the eastern passage, making rifle slings tremble and acid droplets dance across the stone. The air tasted of copper. Beneath the soldiers' boots, black rock vibrated like the hull of a ship under thrust. Elara stopped so abruptly that the column compressed behind her. The gold route lines on the map projector curved toward a narrow shelf overlooking the nesting basin. Below, pale shapes moved through the fog. Hundreds of six-limbed valley creatures packed together, their armored backs scraping the cliffs with a sound like knives dragged across glass. Elias raised one fist. The human army froze. No shots, no shouted orders, only filtered breathing inside thousands of helmets. Another pulse passed through the ground. Every creature turned at once, not toward the soldiers, toward a rusted tower driven into the far wall. Its antenna flashed blue through the fog. Elara lowered the projector and pressed her palm against the stone. The vibration struck again, measured and identical. "That is not a hunting call," she said. "It's a command frequency." Elias linked his tactical display to hers. Spectral bands unfolded across his visor, revealing a narrow ultrasonic carrier buried beneath the valley's natural resonance. The tower transmitted it in repeating waves. Each pulse forced the creatures closer to the sovereign path. "Regency hardware," Elara whispered. A royal authentication glyph flickered inside the signal header. The creatures had never made the valley a killing ground. Someone had trained their pain toward anyone thrown into it. Elias marked the transmitter. An artillery solution appeared immediately, one guided plasma round, 11 seconds to impact. Then the thermal skin sharpened. The tower stood above a nesting chamber. Dozens of smaller heat signatures clustered beneath its foundation, curled against the warmer rock. "Fire mission ready," a soldier said over the command channel. Elara looked at Elias. The fleet was closing overhead. The army had no hidden corridor behind it, and the creatures were already climbing toward the column. One shot would open the path. It would also turn the nesting chamber into molten stone. Elias watched the targeting circle settle. "Cancel fire mission." The words were quiet. The red circle vanished from every helmet. "Commander," another voice warned. "The next pulse puts the herd inside our line." Elias removed his command key from his wrist console. The metal tab was barely 2 inches long, worn silver at the edges. He placed it in Elara's hand. "If I fail, transmit that to the senior captain. It transfers command authority." Her fingers closed around it. "And your retreat?" "There isn't one after I cross the basin." He ordered the army into non-lethal containment formation. Sonic shields rotated forward. Rifles lowered. Portable emitters began generating a countertone, rough and uneven, buying seconds without harming the animals. Then Elias stepped beyond the shield wall, carrying only an insulated cutter and a frequency scrambler. This time, Elara did not walk first. The creatures surged through the green fog, huge silhouettes hammering the ground. Human shields groaned under the first impact, but the line held without firing. Elias moved between their shadows, reached the tower, and drove the scrambler into its corroded service port. Blue light crawled over his gloves. The control system rejected him. He cut through the outer panel instead. Sparks sprayed across wet stone, sharp with the smell of ozone. The next pulse began and died halfway through. Silence struck the valley harder than thunder. One by one, the creatures stopped. Their raised claws sank into the mud. Several turned toward the tower as if waking from the same nightmare. Elias severed the final power conduit. The antenna went dark. Across the basin, the herd slowly opened a path through the fog. Then the dead tower's internal memory core blinked awake, projecting a single Regency access seal onto the rock. Elara stared at the date beneath it. The transmitter had been activated before the human army ever entered Vera, and buried in its command archive was a file addressed to Elias by name. "Commander," she said, holding his command key beneath the cold blue light. "They knew you would come." Cold blue light spilled from the memory core, crawling over the tower's wet stone like frost. Somewhere beyond the broken wall, the creatures moved through the fog with soft, heavy breaths, their claws no longer striking the ground. Elara pressed Elias's command key into the archive slot. The metal was warm from his hand. "This file carries my royal cipher," she said. Elias stood beside the severed conduit, rain hissing against his scorched armor. "Then open it." The archive resisted with a Regency seal. Elara did not search for another access path. She placed her palm against the biometric plate and watched the machine identify the woman the council had condemned. Princess Elara of Vera. Sovereign authority revoked. A second prompt appeared beneath it. Release restricted diplomatic record. The act would register her identity across every surviving Regency relay. Her hand remained flat. "They already named me traitor," she confirmed. The tower filled with static. Then her own voice emerged from the speakers, quieter, younger, recorded under the hum of palace ventilation. "Commander Elias, if this reaches you, the Regency is preparing a war my people did not choose. I request immediate human assistance under the old Mutual Defense Accord. Come without heraldry. Trust no official channel." Elias did not move. Only the muscles along his jaw tightened. On the projection, the message acquired a transmission date from before the human landing. Beneath it appeared his acceptance code, followed by the coordinates that had drawn his army to Vera. Elara turned toward him. "You came because I asked. We came because civilians were going to pay for the council's ambition." The archive advanced. Orders flashed across the damp rock. Redirect the human landing force into Monster Valley. Activate the behavioral transmitter. Falsify battlefield telemetry. Report total human losses. The final decree carried the regent's signature. Human expeditionary force destroyed by indigenous predators. No survivors. Elara's fingers curled against the projection until blue light shone between them. The council had buried her plea, turned the valley's creatures into weapons, and erased an army that had crossed the stars to answer her. Elias reached behind a fractured console and pulled free a weather-stained bundle sealed in thermal cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. A human standard lay inside, dark fabric marked by mud and acid burns. Not destroyed. Hidden. "How long?" Elara asked. 43 days. You could have left. Not with the lie intact. Outside, thousands of human targeting lenses dimmed as soldiers lowered their weapons. They had not endured the valley to reclaim pride or punish Vera. They had preserved their armor logs, casualty records, and the Regency commands that proved who had engineered the slaughter. But military evidence could be dismissed as enemy fabrication. Elara's original cipher could not. She looked down at Elias's command key in her hand. He had given her authority over his soldiers before either of them knew the archive would make her the one witness capable of ending the war. "You were never waiting for rescue," she said. No, his voice was almost lost beneath the rain. "We were waiting for someone Vera would believe." Elara extracted the archive core. Its casing burned cold against her palm. The tower lights died with it, leaving only the red glow of human lenses across the basin and the pale shapes of the calmed creatures in the mist. Elias unfolded the buried standard but did not raise it. He offered it to her. She shook her head, then placed the archive core upon the dark fabric. "Not your flag," she said. "The evidence." Far overhead, engines rolled through the clouds. Regency warships were moving into firing position. Elara lifted the bundled proof herself and walked toward the waiting soldiers. "Open every channel to the fleet." Elias watched her for one silent beat, then transmitted his command key across the army network. Authority shifted with a soft tone inside thousands of helmets. The condemned princess now held the voice of the army the Regency had declared dead. And above Monster Valley, the first targeting locks began to sound. The targeting tone climbed from a pulse into a continuous metallic scream. Above the acid clouds, 6 Regency warships turned their pale bellies toward the valley, and blue fire gathered behind their ventral cannons. Elara stopped between the control tower and the first human trench. The archive core rested against the folded standard in her arms, its casing warm and rough beneath her fingers. "All units," she said. Her voice entered thousands of helmets and every military channel above Vera. "Lower your weapons." No soldier moved until Elias removed his rifle's power cell and placed it on the black stone. The click was small. Then it multiplied along the basin. Magazines released, capacitors discharged, sonic shields fell silent. Without their vibration, the valley filled with the wet breathing of the creatures and the hiss of acid mist touching armor. Elias looked toward the charging ships. They'll read that as surrender. Elara unfastened the white inner layer of her ceremonial mantle. The fabric had survived the fall stained with rust-colored dust, but its center remained bright. She tied it to the buried human standard, covering both royal silver and Earth's faded insignia. That is what I need them to read. Elias understood before she asked. With one turn of his command key, he surrendered tactical encryption. Every human position appeared openly on Regency sensors. Gun emplacements, medical shelters, ammunition stores. Thousands of living soldiers the Council had declared dead. The army became defenseless and impossible to erase quietly. White cloth rose above every trench. Elara walked beyond the shield line carrying the archive core alone. Heat from the targeting beams prickled across her skin. A projected image of the Regent formed in the smoke ahead, 12 feet tall and edged in static. Stand down, the Regent ordered. The condemned royal has been compromised by hostile forces. Fire on her position. Elara pressed the cord to Elias's command key. The archive opened across every fleet display at once. Her original plea for aid, the Regent's authorization, the false casualty decree, and the transmitter orders that had turned living creatures into executioners. No new accusation was needed. The Regent's own seal burned beside every command. Fleet officers, Elara said, you were ordered to destroy invaders. Look below. Human soldiers stood beneath white flags with empty hands. Calmed creatures moved among them, their hides silver in the cannon light. If you fire now, you are not defending Vera. You are destroying its witnesses. The Regent cut across her transmission. She has no title, no inheritance, no legal protection. Her biometrics are revoked. Elara removed the last royal signet from her throat. For a second it caught the blue glare like a tiny moon. Then she laid it on the stone. Correct. The first cannon reached full charge. Its low vibration pressed against her ribs. Elias stepped forward, but Elara raised one hand without looking back. This choice was hers. I claim no crown, she said. I claim responsibility for calling these humans here. If truth is treason, record my treason clearly. Silence entered the fleet channel. One warship's targeting tone stopped. Then another. Across the clouds, cannon light began to fade in separate pools of darkness. A destroyer rolled aside and transmitted the ancient Varen refusal code. 2 cruisers followed. The flagship held its lock. Its weapon remained blue, hot, and aimed directly at Elara. Behind her, no human raised a gun. White flags snapped in the chemical wind. The Regent's projection broke into bands of static as fleet captains demanded independent verification of his authority. Elias watched command traffic turn against the Council, yet the flagship's charge continued to rise. 10 seconds remained before automatic discharge. Elara opened a private channel to its captain. You have the evidence, she said. Now decide whether your oath belongs to an office or to Vera. At 3 seconds, the blue fire vanished. Darkness swept across Monster Valley, followed by the thunder of safeties engaging ship by ship. Then the flagship rotated its cannons away from the basin and toward the Regency command carrier. The Regent's projection disappeared. In its place came a fleet-wide order, quiet and irreversible. Regency authority suspended. All vessels hold fire. Elara stood beneath the white standard, stripped of every legal protection she had possessed at dawn. The guns had fallen silent, but beyond the eastern ridge, the lights of Vera waited, and no law remained to tell its people what she was now. Dawn entered Monster Valley as a thin silver line, turning the acid mist pale above the rocks. The air smelled of hot metal and wet stone. Far overhead, Varen warships held position with their cannons dark, while the Regency command carrier drifted between them under armed escort. Elara climbed the eastern pass without a crown, an escort, or the white standard she had raised beneath the guns. The archive core rested in her bare hands. Its casing was cold enough to numb her fingers. Beyond the ridge, thousands of Varens waited behind the abandoned security gates. No herald announced her. No royal guard cleared a path. An elderly worker stepped forward first, his breathing mask hanging loose against his chest. He touched 2 fingers to the archive core, then moved aside. Others followed. Dockhands, pilots, families wrapped in thermal cloth, fleet officers with their insignia removed. They did not call her princess. They spoke the names of soldiers falsely declared dead, prisoners condemned through the valley, and children taught that monsters had devoured the evidence. Each name carried softly through the morning, heavier than any anthem. Elara reached the old boundary marker and stopped. The royal seal carved into it had been split with a cutting torch. "I cannot restore what my house allowed," she said. Her voice scraped from hours of broadcasting. "But every order in that archive will remain public. Every sentence issued through the valley will be reviewed. No throne will bury them again." She placed the core in the worker's hands. It was the last authority she could have kept for herself. He accepted it, then turned toward the crowd and lifted it where everyone could see. The gates opened from within. A low mechanical groan rolled across the ridge. Still, Elara did not enter. Behind her came the measured impact of thousands of boots on stone. Elias's army emerged from the mist in silent columns, armor stained by 43 days of mineral rain. Rifles remained secured across their backs. White flags had been folded and tied beneath their packs. At the mouth of the pass, Elias raised one fist. The columns halted as one. No soldier knelt. No weapon struck the ground in salute. No cheer broke the clean morning air. Elias walked forward alone, removed his command sidearm, and laid it on the boundary stone between them. "My orders ended with the council's authority," he said. "What happens now is yours." Elara looked past him. The human formation filled the valley entrance. The army hidden beneath red optics. The army sent into a grave. The army that had waited while an empire called it dead. Their ranks separated down the center. Not a ceremonial aisle. A place beside them. Elias stepped into the left column and left the choice open. Elara released the broken clasp at her throat. The last piece of royal silver fell onto the stone with a small, bright sound. Then she crossed the boundary under her own name. The Varens entered from one side. The humans moved from the other. At the center, they turned toward the city together, boots striking the road in one uneven rhythm. Elias did not walk ahead of her. Elara did not follow behind him. They had waited for a princess. In the end, they marched beside a human soul.